Summer here in Nashville, Tennessee is absolutely brutal, especially by the time we get to August. It's like just peak heat, peak humidity here in the nursery. So typically by early morning, I'm out in the nursery doing sort of menial tasks just to avoid the absolute hottest part of the day. So these would be things like dewiring trees, pruning elongating shoots, moving trees around the garden, and just sort of getting things set back up where they need to be. Now, typically, most of the year, we actually have intensive classes going on at the garden. So these usually start around 8:30 or 9 in the morning. So we've got students from all over the country who filter into these classes. But for the months of July and August, because it's so hot here, the trees really aren't growing that much. There's not much to do to the plants other than sort of basic maintenance. We typically close the garden down at this time of year. That allows me some time to get everything back in shape, put the garden back together, and just make things look nice. Now, early in the morning, this is my favorite time to come out to the garden. It allows me to sort of reset myself and kind of commune with the trees, if you will. So I get to walk around the garden and look at the trees, figure out if there's any issues that have arisen over the past couple of days or past couple of weeks, maybe some fungal problems or some pest issues or things that need to just be generally sort of fixed back up. This gives me the opportunity to check on the trees and see exactly what's going on in the garden. In the growing season, typically by around 10 a.m. or so, most of the trees in the nursery have dried out. So this is when I'll do my first watering around the garden. Now, again, this is a great opportunity for me to check on the trees, see if there are any issues that have arisen, see if anything needs to be changed in terms of the watering schedule for a specific tree. Some trees will dry out faster than others, and it's not necessarily a species-related thing, it's an individual tree thing. So a tree could get weak, for example, in this part of the growing season, and we need to back off on the water because it's just not taking up as much, but we could have an identical species, even a tree that was propagated from the same parent plant, so it's genetically identical, sitting right next to that tree that's gotten weak, but it's taken up tons of water, growing like a weed, and we just need to adjust the way we water those plants on a daily basis. So this is one thing that makes watering a very difficult thing to learn and to teach. So, it's a process of many years of figuring these things out in your own environment, your own climate, with your own trees, and then adjusting how you water based on that. I think one thing that gets overlooked at a bonsai nursery, particularly as a bonsai professional, is your sort of health and strength when it comes to lifting trees. A lot of the trees that we work with here, particularly at my nursery, are very heavy plants. But even with some of the lighter weight plants, if you're not carrying them properly when you move them from one location to another in the garden, you can easily throw out your back. I remember my first year in Japan, I was lifting up a hornbeam in the nursery and I just didn't get the bracing right with my core and ended up throwing out my back and had to go see a chiropractor. It took like 6 months for me to feel back to normal. So to avoid that here at my nursery, usually early in the morning, around 6:30 or so, I'll get up and go into my garage and actually lift weights. So I would say the number one most important thing when it comes to lifting is to do squats. Right? I mean, you're developing your legs, your core, like your entire body essentially. So it makes it much easier when it comes to picking up trees and moving those around the nursery. So I try to channel some, Tom Plotz or some, Ronnie Coleman when I'm in there, lightweight baby. You got to make sure you're hitting the heavy weights as much as possible to build up that core. During these summer months, we quite often have major afternoon thunderstorms that pop up really, really quickly. We actually have a lot of straight line winds too that come blowing in always from the west, and it can change dramatically in an incredibly short amount of time. Within a couple of seconds, the wind picks up, the rain comes in, lightning starts striking, and we end up with a downpour. And the nice thing about that is that we don't have to water in the afternoon on a pretty regular basis here at this time of year. So it does give me an extra hour to an hour and a half in the afternoon to dedicate my time to wiring and styling trees or doing other tasks that need to be done around the nursery. Inevitably, the day after we have those straight line winds and thunderstorms, there'll be debris throughout the nursery that has to be cleaned up. There'll be branches and leaves and all sorts of stuff strewn about on the ground. And quite often, some of our landscaping plants will have blown over as well. Like this Japanese maple here, it constantly keeps falling over. So I have to lift it back up, put it back into position, and get everything sort of reoriented around the garden. Now I will say, with those straight line winds, if I know that they're coming or I can sense that they're rolling in, I'll go ahead and move a lot of the trees onto the ground, like the bonsai, for example, if I feel like they're plants that might tip over in the wind. But a majority of the plants end up staying up on the bench, and we really haven't had much of an issue with trees blowing off the benches here around the garden, even though those straight line winds are pretty regular here at the nursery. Now, even though we have a lot of afternoon thunderstorms going on right now, a few weeks ago we actually had a long stretch, a long period where we had no rain at all. We were kind of in a period of drought. And one of our major landscaping trees at the nursery here, this giant cherry tree, ended up dying as a result of that. It was like overnight, it turned brown, all the leaves got crispy and sort of scrunched up, and the tree ended up dying. So unfortunately, I have to cut it down and get it out of the nursery, but that's just the cycle of life and death here around the bonsai garden. So this isn't really typical necessarily, but I've had COVID for the last couple of weeks. So I've been kind of quarantining at an undisclosed location and then coming in and working at the nursery during the day. And my awesome wife has been kind enough to make me breakfast and bring it out to me every day here in the nursery. So it's a really lucky situation. I get to sit down, eat my breakfast here, drink my coffee, and look out at this gorgeous view every single morning. One nice benefit, of course, of shutting down the nursery in July and August is that I have time to wire and style a lot of trees around the garden that I don't really have time to do during the rest of the year when we have classes going on. So this week I have this unbelievable Itoigawa shimpaku juniper that was brought in by a client for me to style up. So it was in desperate need of cleanup, of course, so the trunk was scrubbed and painted with lime sulfur. The live tissue on the tree as well was rubbed down with sandpaper to get a really beautiful contrast between the live vein and the dead wood. And then I spent a number of hours wiring up the branches on the plant. Now, I would consider this tree to be kind of a bunjin style or literati style tree. So I wanted to bring out the best character of the tree by setting the branches in a way that accentuated the elegance of the trunk. So I lifted the undersides of the branches quite significantly on this tree, which does give it a much larger and I think softer and more elegant feel than if I had placed those branches very flat. So depending on the situation with a given tree, I'll adjust how I set those branches to match the character of that specific bonsai. So getting to work on trees like this here in the United States is an absolute honor and privilege, of course. You know, I don't import trees myself from Japan, so most of the material that I have here has to be built from scratch, from raw yamadori or nursery stock material, for example. But every once in a while, I'll have a client who does import trees from Japan and will bring those to the nursery here for me to work on. So it brings me back to my time as an apprentice, getting my hands on these trees that have decades of provenance behind them, a lot of history in a pot, having been collected maybe 20, 30, 40, 50, sometimes 100 years ago, being grown in nurseries and in private collections around Japan, now being here in the United States. So I feel very lucky to get to work on this type of material and show this type of material to you guys around the world via YouTube or Instagram or whatever platform is out there. So without a doubt, the best time of my day is the very end of the day when I get to go back into my house and hang out with my family, including my wonderful little daughter, Luna, who is now currently about 16 months old. So she's a total handful, but the cutest thing in the entire world, in my opinion. So I love, at the end of the day, going inside, washing up, and just hanging out with her, having dinner, and enjoying the rest of my day until it's time to go to sleep, and then we rinse and repeat the next day.
加油，加油，好哦，好哦，把这个捡起来。那小雨勺子给我，小雨勺子给我，勺子给我，勺子，不是水。啊，谢谢你，谢谢你。来，勺子给我，勺子，勺子给我，勺子，勺子给我，勺子给我，小英，勺子给我，来，勺子给我，勺子给我，小英，勺子给我，来。
So this is an ongoing thing, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, to be able to operate a bonsai nursery like this in the way that I do, but it's a job of passion, and I actually don't really consider it that much of a job. It doesn't feel like work when I wake up. I get to come out here and experience working with these trees every single day, even though it is 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's the best career choice in the entire world, and I feel incredibly lucky to be a bonsai professional here in the United States.